class, today we're going to talk about composition and still life. So composition is a tool for artists. Artists have many different goals. Some stories that they tell. Hi class, today we're going to talk all about composition and still life. Composition is a tool for artists. Artists create art for many different reasons. Some like to tell a story, some like to express a belief or a current event, some like to see or like to share how they see the world, some like to do emotion, okay? But every single artist uses composition as a tool, and composition is a way that the elements and principles of art are used to express emotion and ideas and really organize a space that guides the viewer's eye. So regardless of style, subject, purpose, composition is used by all artists. It is very important to becoming a good artist, and it's really just how things are arranged on a page. So let's talk about this composition right here. This kind of shows a triangular composition. It's really stable, it's geometric. It kind of tells you where, or tells your viewer where you want them to look. And it also implies some shapes that aren't actually present, right? There's not really a triangle there, but it suggests that there's there. So you have really good movement here, unity, rhythm, and it creates this really nice focal point. The next thing I want to talk about is rule of thirds. Rule of thirds is extremely important. This is also in photography as well. It's used in all art forms, and it's basically like you have your paper cut into different third points. Most importantly, you want to have your subject on one of these third lines. So it could be here, it could be here, it could be here, or down here as well. So it really has the viewer hone in on what you want them to look at, and it's a really nice way to show your interest. The next one is a golden rectangle. So this is based on the golden ratio and divine proportion, and it's really mathematical. It's a developed formula, and it's often in nature, so like with seashells, plants, flowers, stars, things like that. The next one I want to talk about is the rule of odds. So having an odd number in a composition really means that your brain can't pair them up or group them easily, so it makes it a lot more interesting for a viewer to look at because your eye keeps moving across the composition, because naturally your brain wants to group things together, but if you have odd numbers it can't do that, so it makes it extremely more interesting to the composition. All right, leading lines. If you guys can see on this right here, this line is leading you backwards into the painting. So the line that just guides your viewer's eye, the viewer knows exactly where they should look. My eye kind of goes back here, and then it comes back around up here. Okay, so you really are telling the viewer where you want them to look. Strong diagonal lines. Strong diagonal lines is a form of leading lines, and it can transform something that's a little bit more boring and make it a little bit more dynamic. A very important thing in the composition is filling in the frame. It's not always necessary to have your whole frame filled up with your subject, but in composition, it really helps to fill in the entire frame. And in this class, if you get anything out of this class, I want you to be able to fill up the entire frame of your composition. And it is a lot more effective than it is to just do something itty bitty on a big sheet of paper. All right, let's take just a few minutes to look at this painting right here. So it has a lot of good composition rules. Something that stands out to me right away is that it has that really good leading lines. So you have the line that leads back here. It has a lot of good diagonal lines as well. You have lines here, lines on the floor. It's really simplified. It fills the whole frame, and it really tells the viewer where you want them to look. All right, let's talk a little bit more about still life now and grouping and contrast. So there's many ways you can group your object to make them interesting or to make them artistically pleasing. So one way you can use visual interest is by using contrast. You can do contrast by size, by color, by forms, things like that. So you can see, and this is a really good way to show your objects contrasting in form, contrasting in size down here, Another thing you can do is you can do a triangle grouping, which we talked about earlier, a square composition, or you can do a circular composition as well. These are some of my very favorite ones to use. I'm a very big fan of the triangle grouping. I think that's the most interesting, but you can always use contrast as well to make your composition interesting. All right, let's talk about your light source and your background. A light source can be a little bit tricky when you are at home. And really what I want you guys to do for our projects is I want you guys to get some sort of a lamp, or even if you just have a window open and all of your other lights off, you just want a constant light source against a background. So when you are drawing or painting, there's a lot of light source coming from different directions sometimes. And in order to have a really successful still life, you want to have one singular light source. So get a lamp, put it next to you, turn off all the other lights, something that just shows a really strong light source so that you can see shadows in your still life. All right, a few other things that are very, very important for still life. When you guys are drawing a still life, it is important that you do these steps. So your first step is you want to arrange everything. You want to do a very, very simple sketch and start off that way and just do very, very simple, get the basic shapes, make sure everything is proportionately where they're supposed to go. Then you're going to start to add a little bit more, and eventually you will add more and more details. But I want you guys to do one step at a time. So you're going to draw all of your objects very simply, then add more and more and more detail, add your shadows, all of those things like that. Oh. Okay, for your project, I want you guys to gather some stuff around your house. In class, we use candy, so it looks something like this. And I have attached a little grid for you. So I want you to print this off, and I want you to put your objects on the grid. It doesn't have to be candy. It could be any sort of food. It could be anything that you have laying around the house. It could be art supplies. It could be money. It could be pencils. It could be whatever you have laying around your house that you have a few small ones of. Something I want you guys to remember about this is that I want you guys to choose a focal point. Use the rule of thirds on your grid. I have made it so that they have the rule of thirds on there already for you. And you want to make all four corners unique, and you want to use an odd number. So I suggest getting 3 things or 5 things so you have that really nice odd number. What you are going to do is you are going to gather your stuff, then you are going to arrange them 3 different times. Each time you arrange them, you are going to create a thumbnail. If you don't know what a thumbnail is, it's just a tiny little, very, very simple drawing. You just need to do the outline. It should not have a lot of detail. It should take you about 2 minutes, and you want to just do a tiny little drawing of what the composition will be. I want you guys to do this on the rest of the paper that's on this. It comes in a little bit of a bigger sheet. I want you to just do that below this, and I want you guys to decide which composition is best, and then leave your items on here. In class, we glued them down, but since you just have your stuff at home, you don't need to glue them down because you'll be able to keep them in a nice safe spot where they will not get moved. So on this sheet, do 3 compositions, do your 3 thumbnails, decide which one is best, and I want you to take a picture of this with your stuff and your thumbnails, and that is going to be one portion that you're going to turn in. Okay, here's an example of somebody that did it in class. They glued theirs down, so they have all their candy arranged. They did all of their thumbnails. I passed them off, and then they could glue them down or just set them on there since you guys are at home. After this, you guys are going to take a blank sheet of paper, and I want you to draw out this grid very, very lightly. I want you to expand it on your paper and start to draw your still life objects. So with your still life objects, you want to be able to have a good enough light source that you can see some shadow, and you want to try to make it look as realistic as possible. And you also needs to be colored in colored pencil. Okay, you want to have a full background. It should look something like this down here. You do not want to have the grid left over when you are done. You really want to have just a solid background, erase the grid, color everything in, make it look neat and nice and realistic as possible. So first step are thumbnails. Grab your stuff, and then after you have done your 3 thumbnails and you decide what the best composition are, you're going to take a picture of those, and then draw your project, and you're going to turn in your thumbnails and your still life picture, and then also your project picture into Google Classroom. All right, thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed this project. It'll be really fun to see what outcomes you come up with.